This is sediment. What makes up the deposits that accumulate in the bottom of a water heater? Sand, silt, dirt, rust, which is directly supplied by your water source, either it be well or city water. And when water is heated, calcium present precipitates out of solution and drops to the bottom as a byproduct called calcite, the stuff that sticks. In a gas water heater, that sediment layer acts as a barrier between the gas flame and the water that you're heating, reducing the efficiency. It also creates a loud popping, rumbling noise, which can be quite annoying. More importantly, that now you've subjected the bottom of the water heater to overheating, which fatigues the metal and shortens the service life. In an electric water heater, the elements become encrusted with scale, and that reduces the efficiency. When the element fires, it produces a loud hissing noise. And if the lower element is encased in the sediment at the bottom of the heater, you'll have to replace those elements more often. What can we do to reduce scale? Well, there's some simple things. One, put in a sediment filter. This will reduce sediment to the water heater, and as a bonus, it'll reduce sediment to your faucet aerators, so you don't have to clean them as often. One of the recommendations I would make is that this goes directly on the supply pipe, so it takes care of the entire house. And you put a couple of unions in here, so if there's ever a problem with this, you can replace it easily. Buy one with a clear canister so you can see what's going on. They're generally a 6-month filter on replacement, but if you see a reduced flow to the house, change it out more often. And I like this unit because it's got a valve up here. You don't have to shut off the main supply. You can shut it off here and pull the canister up to get to the filter. Number 2, consider magnet technology. In a 2014 research study conducted by the University of Arizona to seek out environmentally safe alternatives to salt-based softeners, it was found that by applying magnets to the supply line, feeding a test water heater, there was a 17 to 70% reduction in scale formation on the elements and in the bottom of the heater. Now, the magnets do not get rid of the scale, but what they do is they change the structure of the scale. So calcium, when heated, turns to calcite. When a magnet field interrupts that calcite and moves it in different directions, it turns it into a byproduct called aragonite. And that aragonite is softer and less sticking. This is just a device I got off the internet. It straps onto your main pipe coming into the house. It's a simple device, but in my own research, I found that they come with different Gauss readings, which is the actual strength of the magnetic field. So make sure that you get one with top Gauss readings. Don't always look at cost, and that'll do a better job for you. Thirdly, we're going to install a system called Turbo Flush, and I'm going to show you how to do that today. It's an upgrade from what the manufacturer puts in, and we're going to put in something modified just a little bit. It's off-the-shelf stuff, except for the dip tube I'm going to show you, which gives you that swirling motion that allows you to pick up that material. Let's get started. So, here's the valves. This is the valve the manufacturer puts in. You can probably see, I'm looking at my monitor, and you can see the opening on that valve. That's about 1/4 inch. You see the opening on this valve, which is approximately 8 times the supplied valve. Now, the manufacturers sell these as a drain valve. We sell our valve as a drain and flush valve, and you can see why. One of the considerations here is that this gives you a 1/4 turn, so it's a ball valve. 1/4 turn, boom. I got instant pressure coming out of that water heater. It also gives you good service if you ever needed to use your water heater as an emergency supply of drinking water, and good reason to keep it clean. So we're going to replace that. I'm going to show you how. First things first, if you got an electric water heater, turn off the breaker to the electric water heater. On a gas water heater, simply turn the flame to pilot. Then turn off the water supply at the valve. And make sure that you have your valve assembly. For instance, this valve is going to be the new valve. And I can find my Teflon. There it is. You're going to set up your new valve assembly by simply getting this valve prepped. And so I want you to take Teflon, and the way to apply Teflon is you put it on clockwise. Why? Because I'm going to put the fitting on clockwise. So whatever way your fitting's going on, make sure that you put the Teflon on the same way the fitting goes on. Now, 2 wraps of Teflon. This is joint compound. You can get it in white, you can get it in blue, you can get it in yellow. I like it because it gives me just that little extra seal, and it stays soft. So if I ever need to disassemble this, which heat will cause this to actually adhere a little harder to the tank. And then I'm going to assemble this. I'm going to get it ready. I don't have to tighten it. And then I'm going to put the cap that's supplied with this valve, and I'm going to put the valve handle straight out. Why do I do that? Because if the handle's out here and I go to put it in the bottom, I might hit an obstruction over here. I might hit an obstruction over here. Now, one of the things to think about when you're thinking about changing out the manufacturer's valve is that look at your situation, because every situation is different. You may have a door on one side. You may have a pipe on one side that's an obstruction. You may have to come out 45 over. You may have to come out 90 over. You may have to put in a longer nipple. And you can readily buy 6-inch or 5-inch plastic lined nipples. And one of the things to think about, if you look at this, you see that? That's a formed end nipple. That doesn't allow water movement behind the plastic to come between the plastic and metal, which will produce rust. So when you're buying these nipples, make sure that you get a formed end nipple. That's important. And I can probably show you an example of that in a dip tube that a manufacturer actually puts together. You see that nipple there? Okay. That nipple doesn't have a formed end. See what happens? It moves water into the tank, and it went between the metal and the plastic, and it's forming rust. Not a good design. So, what we're going to do first, we got our valve ready. we've got a bucket. Make sure you got a bucket. Make sure you got some rags. That's a good thing. Make sure you also have the right tools. So these are some of the tools I would use. This is a side wrench. Comes in handy on a lot of different things. This is an offset wrench. Some people call them monkey wrenches. This is my preference tool. Although if I get in tight corners, these are just kind of like a adjustable, I call them plumber's pumps. And I'll show you why. This is an offset wrench, basin wrench, but I can offset it and I can go one way, I can come this way and go the other way. And I'm going to show you how to use that. First, we got the water off. I'm not draining the tank. Why am I not draining the tank? Because I'm in a garage. So I'm not worried about damage. If I had it in a closet outside, I wouldn't be worried about damage. If it's in the house and I'm removing a plastic valve, I may consider not leaving this tank full unless I think I can loosen that valve. But I wouldn't take that precaution, because in a house where you can damage with flooding or water damage, here's what can happen, and it has happened but not very often. That valve can actually crack off in the tank, the plastic valve. Now, if you run into that particular problem and you're in a location where you don't mind a little water coming out, there's a trick to get it out of there. You take a blade like this, it's got a nice sharp edge on it. It's thin enough that I can get in between, and what I'm doing is I'm going to cut in pies, 3 to 4, and I'm going to cut down to where I just feel the metal, and I'm going to stop. Then I'm going to take a screwdriver and I'm going to pop each one of those little pie pieces down, and you may need a needle nose pliers to pull them out, but generally the water will push them out once you dislodge them. So be aware of what you're doing, where you're doing this, and if it's in a spot where you can damage the house, drain the tank down. Simply hook a hose to the bottom, drain it down first, turn the pilot off, just turn the water heater off on a gas heater, make sure that's off, and drain it all the way down. Then, if you break it, you don't have to worry about water damage. So, enough for the details. Let me drain this down. I'm going to put a bucket under here. I have got the water off. I'm going to open this plastic valve until I don't hear any more pressure coming out, until it's at a drip. I'm now going to shut it off. Okay. Now, in this case, I'm going to use this basin wrench because I'm going to show you probably one of the most difficult situations that you might get into. This, you see, has ridges. So you have a grabbing area here, and it's got an extension so that you can get a wrench around it. See the jaws on this? They're nice and thin. So I can get behind it and I can unscrew it easily. Now, most valves are made with extensions now, but some of the older heaters you'll find are up against the water heater like this. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put that basin wrench underneath there, and there's my adjustable wrench, and this is a square basin wrench, and I'm going to loosen it with that because I can grab it. I can't get it with any of my other tools. The jaws are too big, and I'm going to loosen it to the point where I can actually loosen it by hand, and then before I remove it, I don't know if that valve's good, that shutoff valve. It may actually leak a little water out of it, which means it's building pressure in that water heater right now. So to make sure I don't blow that valve across the garage, I'm going to put the bucket back under. I'm going to reopen it. Okay, I don't have any pressure. So I know this valve is good. So now we're going to remove it. I'm going to put a couple of rags down on the ground just to pick up any water that I might spill. And in one action, I'm going to move that handle forward so it doesn't interfere when I go to turn it. And I'm going to pull this out, and as a quick motion, it's going to drop. I'm going to put this valve on, and I'm going to screw it in. And there we go. I didn't have to drain the tank. Some tanks, the problem is, if you got a lot of scale in them, and you're trying to drain through that 1/4-inch hole, it could take forever. Now some people used to do a trick. We used to hook a compressor on here, pump the compressor through the TPR by opening the valve, and that would move the water out even quicker if you wanted to really pump it out. So now we got the valve. I got an extension on it. I came straight out. I'm now going to tighten it. Now, if you want to keep it clean, you can go with the adjustable. And that'll give you, keep the body of the valve clean. And what I like to do, don't get crazy with it. You bring it around till it feels tight. You can always check for leaks. Okay, got plenty of sealant on there. Now I'm going to close the valve. There we go. Now, next process is we're going to change out what's called a dip tube. Manufacturers supply dip tubes in two different styles. One has a nipple, and that nipple is attached to a dip tube. The other style, which is fairly common, has a flare, if you can see that, a flare, and that flare drops into a little overlay inside, below the nipple, on the cold side of the tank, right here. Okay, this is your cold inlet. So, we're going to remove what the manufacturer puts in, which, with this dip tube. Now, let me see if I can show it to you. We got two dip tubes that came out of heaters. One's that length, and one with the nipple is that length. Now you see the difference? The dip tube I'm putting in is longer, okay? What's that going to do? It's going to give you better displacement of hot water. Because what a dip tube does is it drives cold water down and moves hot up. If you're not moving the cold water down, but say 60% down, you're not getting as much diffusion of water, displacement. And with this tube, you're going to pick up anywhere from 5 to 10 gallons more production of hot water to the top when you're using it. So the advantage of this is more hot water, and if you see the curve. Okay, that curve moves water to the back of that tank, and when this valve, which has almost the same opening as the opening on the tube, is open, that swirling motion picks up the debris and moves it out under pressure. We're not draining the tank, we're flushing, meaning that this valve is open, and under full pressure, it's coming out. Now the other trick is that while it's in there, I'm going to turn it. under pressure, 360 degrees. What do we call that? That's called turbo flush. Okay, turbo flush allows you to move 360 degrees. That curve pointing down towards the background is picking up that debris. Why is that important? Because the bottom of the tank on a gas water heater is 1.5 inches below the valve. So we need some way to force pressure down to the back wall, down into the crevices, and move that material up and out. You're not going to do it with these dip tubes. Now some people, some manufacturers, people, sell products in their water heaters that say they're sand blasters or scale blasters or hydro jets. And what they're doing, they're proposing that they are putting in a self-cleaning device. And what they'll do is they will add this, something like this. You see it has several little streamlined ports that are supposed to push a stream up, down, out, which moves the structure of the hard particle before it settles to the bottom, up and out. And they attach them to their existing dip tubes, or they're built into the dip tube. And you see in this case, they have built in this thing that puts the water out in little jet streams. Now, do they work? Yeah, they work to a certain extent, but one of the things that you have to think about is that there's a thing called standby heat losses. When you're sleeping, that water heater loses heat. And I'm going to turn the water, fires. When it fires, those hard minerals drop. These devices do not pick up hard minerals off of the bottom once they've formed. But does our device? Yes, it does. And it does a fantastic job. But one thing to keep in mind, if you're adding it to a water heater that's 5 years old and you're in a super hard water area, don't expect fantastic results. It would be better if the heater was just starting to pop, making a noise, meaning that that material is still loose. It'll do a great job there. If you're not hearing any popping noise, but you know you're in a really hard water area, I can tell you probably got a layer that thick in the bottom of the heater. And this is not going to do a great job for you. But keep in mind, if it's added to a new water heater and you start flushing on a regular basis, it's going to perform really well for you and probably will eliminate that scale buildup in the bottom of the heater. How do we install that new dip tube? Simple. First, we got the water off. And we've already drained down a little bit of water. So what I'm going to do, we're going to loosen this flex connector. Okay, and when I say flex connectors, I'll stop right there, because flex connectors are the best thing that ever happened. And when I say that, it's easy to remove a water heater and replace it with flex connectors. The other thing is, if you look over here, you'll see 6 inches up, 6 inches down, and 6 inches back up provides you with the best heat trap that you can get. And if you want to do something added, you put a little bit of insulation on here. If you're in an earthquake area, a flex connector, as far as I'm concerned, is a requirement. It allows for movement of that water heater. You don't want that hot water heater coming off a stand. So earthquake straps, flex connectors to take up any movement. And as you can see, the stainless, I believe, are the best. You can tie these things in knots. So buy a 24-inch connector. If you have no flex connectors, convert over. And the way you do that is, this is what's called a shark bite fitting. You cut the copper back, you push it on. Now you've got your connector. If you've got CPVC pipe, cut it, glue it. Now you've got your connector. These are, as you can see, that's a shark bite fitting. You've probably seen those. Any hardware store, Home Depot, you can get them at. So, consider flex connectors. And, get back to what I was doing. Okay, we're going to remove it and pull it up and out of the way. I'll tell you, I got a little light here. This really goes a long way. Now that I've disconnected that flex connector and I got water dripping out of it, I'm going to take some more water out of the tank and I'm going to move it down just a quart or so, you know. And that'll give you enough space between the connector and the pipes so that you don't have water coming out of there when we pull the dip tube. Now again, I'm going to show you the worst scenario that you might run into. I like these. I think I said it earlier. These are pumps. Okay. I can grab easy, and once you get used to them, they're like using chopsticks or something. You know, you have to grab and then pull. Now, obviously, I've taken this apart before, but I want to show you a trick. If you run into when you are dealing with a manufactured water heater that's never been touched and you're removing the nipple, take a socket extension. You can get one shorter than this, but one that will go in far enough. And I'm going to drop that down inside so I at least encompass the inside where my jaws are going to grab. And then I'm going to take this side wrench and I'm going to adjust it, because the manufacturers can put these nipples in so hard that if you don't use something to stop that nipple from collapsing when you put a lot of pressure on there, you'll never get that nipple out. I mean, if you can, you have to go in there and basically go in with a chisel and pop it till you bring it into each other so that you can get it out of the threads. So if it's in real tight, get yourself a good wrench, put a breaker bar on it, and then apply pressure. It'll come out, no problem. Anyway, okay, so get the valve out, or the nipple out. I can do that with my hand now. Now, one of the things you want to be careful with, and let me show you one of these dip tubes. And get yourself a stool, especially if the water heater's up a little high, it's on a stand. These will generally have a gasket right here, okay? And on top of that, because if you had a nipple in that tank that didn't have a lining, it will form dirt on top of this, which will restrict you from getting this out the tank. So what we want to do is we want to take a screwdriver. We want to make sure that we clean all that. Now it'll just go into the tank, it's not a problem. We're going to flush it out anyways, but make sure it's nice and clear up here. And then you can pull it out. How are we going to pull it out of there? The best tool I found is this. It's about a $6 tool. It's an easy out. If I move this way, it just keeps turning. But if I move this way, it grabs. And I mean, it really grabs. So I use this from a professional standpoint. But if you don't have this, sometimes these will work. You get them down, you push them down inside, and you can pull it out this way. Or you'll take a screwdriver, dig it in, and as you dig, you pull up. That's another good way to get them out. Okay, I'm going to go in. Now, I've already cleaned this. I've gone back and forth with this tank. So I'm going to take my little easy out, and I'm going to pull it out of there. And I get my little ladder here, and come on, there we go, see? There's that gasket, that rubber gasket. Okay, I'm going to pull that out. Now, here's the difference. The difference between the dip tube we're putting in and the diameter of the one I took out tells me that I have a metal overlay in there, because this is flared, that will need to be cut out. And you're probably going, oh my God, he wants me to cut metal in the tank? Believe me, I've done this 1,000 times. It's not a problem. It's an overlay that they put in, has nothing to do with the integrity of the tank. The welds are actually on the other side of the tank. So what works is a 7/8 hole saw. I take the 7/8 hole saw, I take it between the threads, get my connector out of the way, make sure your chuck is nice and tight so you don't lose the drill bit in there, and I'm going to cut between those threads. Now that I'm in the bottom on the overlay, I can start cutting. And just apply light pressure. Okay, we got it. The 7/8 allows me just enough room to take out just enough overlay to put this in. You can see. See, just a little oversized from that end of that dip tube. Now, the next step is that we need to know the direction that tube is in. I want to point this tube after I'm done installing it. I want to make sure it's pointed to the back round of the tank, somewhere between 11 and 1 o'clock. That's going to give me the best circulation of movement to get through the entire tank and pick up that material, move it out that valve. So how do I do that? I point that tube away from me. Okay, it's looking the opposite. It's looking where I'm looking. And I'm going to mark the nipple. Okay. Now, again, we're going to apply Teflon. How do we apply it? We're going to put it on the way that the fitting goes on, okay? So the flex fitting is going on this way. 2 wraps, okay? If I turn it around, obviously, the fitting would be going this way, so I would put it on that way. But I'm going to do it reverse because it's easier for me. So I'm going to look at it like this, and I'm going to put it like it's going in the tank, right? So in reality, I'm putting it on counterclockwise. And I get a little drag there. I'll take that off. Now, same thing. We are going to put some lubricant on there. That's the paste, good old paste. Does a great job. Okay. Now, I'm going to install it. If you're in a tight spot, for instance, you can bend this. It won't crack. Unless it's super cold, it might crack. So you might want to warm it up if you're in a cold climate. Now, I've cut that out, so this is easily going to go in. I'm going to bend it back a little if you got room to do that. If not, the heat and the water heater will take care of that for you. I just got to get it started. Come on. There it is. Okay. Now, again, I like these. So I'm going to put it in till it's tight, and I want that line looking somewhere back here at about 12 o'clock. Somewhere in there. 12, 11, 1. It'll all work. And there we go. I'm going to reconnect it up. Make sure I got my heat trap going in the right direction. Reconnect it. Okay. So next step is we're going to hook a hose to the bottom. Now, if for some reason you are living in a house that has a water heater inside a closet in the house, you may have to have assistance to have somebody hold the hose either in a tub or in a toilet while you do this flushing. So I'm going to hook a hose to the bottom. And if you got a good hose, that's going to be better. If you can get a 3/4 hose, that's really good. Not a 1/2 inch. 5/8 diameter, inside diameter of a hose is a good hose. That'll give you a good flow through the heater. But if you can get one 3/4, that's even better. But a 5/8 will do just fine. Those are pretty common. And I like to just kind of tighten that nut up so I don't get any flow coming out of there. And I'm going to turn the water back on. And one other point I want to make to you, connect a strainer with a zip tie. This is just a paint strainer you can get at any hardware store. It allows you to capture that sediment so that you can see it. And of course it'll retain it so it doesn't go down the street into the gutters. So that's a good thing to do. Now let me show you how to do turbo flush. Turbo flush is a method I probably mentioned to you that allows you to move that dip tube 360 degrees counterclockwise, 360 degrees clockwise. And the way you do that, we've got our valve on, we're under pressure. I'm going to take the half nut on the flex connector back one full turn. Now I don't have any leakage, but it just allows me to be able to turn that nipple slowly. And I'm going to move that mark that's looking at me, telling me the dip tube's looking to the back. I'm going to move it slowly. And while I'm moving it slow, I'm going to listen for the material moving out the hose. So I want to go slow until the noise dissipates. I'm going to bring it all the way around to me until that mark's looking at me again. Now, I'm going to take it back to a locked position, slowly going clockwise, all the way back to where that mark comes back to me. Now, I didn't take that nipple out enough to cause that nipple to leak. I only went one turn. I put that nipple in at least 7 or 8 turns. That one turn is not going to allow that nipple to leak. So don't worry about that. Now, I'm going to lock us down again. so we don't have any leaks, and that's it. Now, you don't have to do turbo flush every time you flush. You can just flush regular, meaning your valve's on, you run a hose outside or wherever you need to, and you open that valve and you let it run for a minute or two. If you live in a hard water area, or you're just installing this on a new tank, of course, you're going to want to do turbo flush on a new install. But if you're doing this on a regular flushing, do it once a year. I mean, I'm not going to tell you can't do it more often, but once a year should be sufficient. And in between, just regular flushes. And if you're in a real hard water area, maybe every 3 months. If you're not in a real hard water, maybe every 6 months. So, the other thing, how do you know what size dip tube to get? Well, these dip tubes, these are standard. Now, these work in about 95% of the cases. Some electric heaters will need longer ones, and we do supply a longer dip tube. But this is standard for most gas and most electric water heaters. And it could be just a little bit short of the bottom. It could get close to the bottom. You've got 1.5 inches below that valve, the actual nipple of the valve, before you hit bottom on a gas heater. Gas heaters have concave, so there's a gas flame under them. An electric heater has a flat bottom. So you can go a little longer on the dip tube. Now, the only difference would be you might have to order a dip tube with a 6-inch nipple, which we can supply, because on electric heaters, after 2015, they required more insulation. So most electric heaters have anywhere from 3 to 4 inches of insulation, which means you're going to need to come up with a longer nipple. So simply take a measurement from the top of your nipple to the top where you know the threads are connected to the tank. Okay, in this case I'm at 43, but I'm at the top of the drain valve. I've actually got 2 inches to play with. I got 45 inches. This tube from here at the bottom, tube only, is 44.5 inches exactly. Now, if you run into a tank that's a little shorter, you've got at least 4 inches you can cut off before that curve. As long as you keep the curve, you can cut off excess amount of dip tube in order to get the dip tube in your particular tank. So, go to the link down below. It'll take you to our website. And then, what do we say? Simple solutions to save the earth, one water heater at a time. Now, in our next presentation, and stay tuned, we'd love to have you back, I'm going to go over anode function, which stops corrosion in a water heater, how to remove, how to replace, where to use it. So stay tuned. We'll see you next time. Thanks for being here.